welcome to our online service here at the Solid Rock, 5th of February 2023. Today we're bringing you a special. We're going to do something different to normal. It's going to be a different format, but I know you are going to be blessed. We have the whole service, both our in-person services and this online service, dedicated to having our very own Pastor Janice Park share her story. As you know, our theme for this year is My Story. And so Pastor Janice is going to be sharing her story in this service. But not only that, she's going to be sharing and singing songs with us throughout the service that she wrote all herself as a part of her journey and sharing her testimony with us. So I know that you will be blessed. Enjoy the service.
Hello, it's my privilege this morning to share with you some of my story. I'm going to be speaking and also singing some songs that I wrote during some of the difficult seasons on my life's journey. So I trust and pray that you will be blessed as you listen. I'm going to begin by just sharing. I was born in Evesham, Worcestershire. I was only there for 3 months because my parents were Salvation Army officers, which is like a minister or a pastor. And they moved around. They were appointed to different places. Sometimes we moved as much as every year. So there was myself, my younger sister Fiona, and my younger brother Lyndon. And I personally have lived in 33 houses. So I'm well used to moving house. So that really impacted me as a young child, moving from house to house. And it was really like the familiar world that you knew suddenly was gone and you were in a new world. So it was big adjustment, and especially going to new schools where everybody all had their own groups already established and I would be on the outside looking in. So I became quite shy in the school environment. But in the church, in the Salvation Army, I thrived because we always moved as a family unit. So I felt secure in the family unit. And so I had a good childhood, very good childhood. At the age of 7, I asked Jesus into my life in Ballymena, Northern Ireland, in the Salvation Army Corps, or church as we know it. I asked Jesus into my life there. And I really loved God as a child. I prayed to him, and I had a big children's Bible. I used to carry that around everywhere I went. As a teenager, God called me to full-time ministry, to go to be a Salvation Army officer. Now, as pastors' children, we were always told, you need to set the example. You need to show the way to be. So I kind of rebelled against that because I didn't want to be known as the Holy One or the one to be setting the example. So I didn't rebel from God, but I did rebel from the call of God. And it was a little bit like Jonah and the whale in the Bible, where Jonah ended up swallowed by the whale before he said yes to God. So eventually, after a battle and fighting, I had no peace, I had no joy, so I said yes to God. And when I surrendered to God and became obedient to him, I found that peace and I found that joy and I found that fulfillment. And so at the age of 22, I stepped out and I went over to London to the Salvation Army Training College. It's like a Bible college, and where I spent 2 years training to become a Salvation Army officer or a full-time minister of the gospel. The first song I'm going to sing is Your Love is Greater Than Words Can Ever Say.
So special, I feel secure within your love. Your spirit's here, you are so gentle, you descend upon me like a dove, and all the problems and the struggles and the emptiness I felt, the confusion and the doubts have gone away. Just one touch of your spirit and the melting of my heart. Your love greater than words could ever say. Lost in your love, resting in your care, I find the strength to carry on. You fill my soul, you heal my pain, you lift me up where I belong. And all the problems and the struggles and the emptiness I felt, the confusion and the doubts have gone away. Just one touch of your spirit and a melting of my heart. Your love is greater than words could ever say. Such peace of mind I can't contain. The waves of love, they flood my soul. Jesus, my Lord, I sing your name. You've cleansed my heart and made me whole. And all the problems and the struggles and the emptiness I felt, the confusion and the doubts have gone away. Just one touch of your spirit and a melting of my heart. Your love is greater than words could ever say. And all the problems and the struggles and the emptiness I felt, the confusion and the doubts have gone away. Just one touch of your spirit and a melting of my heart. Your love is greater than words could ever say. Just one touch of your spirit and the melting of my heart. Your love is greater than words could ever say.
I met my husband Nick in a Salvation Army men's shelter for the homeless alcoholics. I was with a team of ministers that were going in to team of musicians that were going in to minister to them. And as Nick always says, I must have ministered very well because we'd been happily married for 37 years. We served for 2 years in the Salvation Army Leicester, the first 2 years of our marriage. And then after 2 years, we left the Salvation Army. We believed that God had other plans for us. And I remember at the time thinking of Noah in the Bible, when God called Noah to build an ark or a boat. And everybody laughed at him because there was no rain, it was a drought. And why was he building this ark? But he acted in obedience to God and he stepped out. And of course, we know in the Bible that the floods came and the world was destroyed and all those in the ark were saved. So it kind of felt a little bit like that. It seemed like a crazy move, but we were just obeying God. And so we moved to Atherton in Lancashire, England, and we lived with my granny until we got a house to live in. And while we were there, when we moved, I was pregnant with my first child. While we were there, Kirsty was born. She was born on the 17th of August, 1988, and she was 8 pounds 3 ounces. And I remember just holding this baby in my arms and thinking, wow, this is our baby. And I felt so much joy. She was our pride and joy, and she still is our pride and joy. And we have unconditional love for Kirsty, and we always will. I got pregnant more or less straight away with my second child, because before Kirsty, I'd had a miscarriage, and it took quite a long time to conceive again with Kirsty. So the second child was coming very quickly, and soon on in the pregnancy, The scans were showing that something was wrong, and the doctors were saying there's problems with the baby. They actually described the baby as having a small head. Now, they probably just meant that the baby was small, but for me, a young pregnant mother, I was alarmed, and I thought, what am I carrying? You know, I just imagined this baby with a tiny head. So there was worry and anxiety even during the pregnancy. She wasn't growing, she wasn't developing. I only put on half a stone the whole pregnancy. Anyway, on the 20th of August 1989, 1 year and 3 days after Kirsty was born and 3 weeks before my baby was due, I went into the hospital. They were bringing me in for 10 days of observation where they could keep an eye on me. So Nick dropped me off. He went to pick up my mum from the airport. She was flying over from Northern Ireland to look after Kirsty. And I went into the ward, and the nurse, they came and gave me food. I ate a lovely tea. I can't remember all the details, but the nurse came and she was listening to the baby's heartbeat. And I listened and I could hear, and it was like really, really slow. And I thought, that doesn't sound right. And I said, is everything okay? And she says, yeah, I think there's just a problem with the machine. And she disappeared. And the next thing, the room filled with all these doctors. And they came in and they said, your baby is dying in the womb. We're going to have to operate straight away. We're going to take you for an emergency cesarean. Now, you haven't eaten anything, have you? I says, well, yeah, I've just had my tea. So they made me describe everything that I'd eaten, right down to every detail. And then he just said to me, I just have to let you know that you may not survive this. You may choke because you've eaten, and you may not come through this. And I was taken away off to a little room to get prepared for this surgery. So you can imagine how I felt. I was actually trembling. I was alone. There was no mobile phones in those days. Nick wasn't there. And I was just shaking with absolute fear in this room. And they were putting my clothes into a bag, and I was thinking, oh, if I don't make it, they're just going to hand him the bag. Rings and all had gone in, and say, sorry, she didn't make it. So I was very fearful. I felt very fearful, and I felt very alone. You see, we're not always full of faith. Sometimes life circumstances cause us to be full of fear. But anyway, I went for the surgery, and the next thing, I opened my eyes and I just heard a voice say, you have a little baby girl. And our daughter Grace was born. She was only 2 pound 15 ounces, even though she was so close to full term. And they took her straight away into special care. I never got to see her at all. She went into the special care unit and she was placed in an incubator. And eventually, after a few days of my recovery, I was able to go and to see her. And we had to put gloves and gowns on, and we could just reach through and be able to touch her through the incubator. I really was in a state of shock. The shock even of just what I'd just been through myself. But one thing I knew was that in spite of my fears and all the uncertainties, that God had brought me through, and we had a new baby. And the next song I'm going to sing reminds us that there are treasures that money can't buy, peace of mind, joy. And it's called In Your Presence is Fullness of Joy.
Lord, in this moment, I give myself to you. So Jesus, take me and break me and fill my life anew. There I look to you and see those tears of pain for me. You say I understand how you feel, and it's gonna be alright. So look to me with confidence and feel my love so real. In your presence is fullness of joy. In your presence is fullness of joy. And no matter where I go or what I face in life, in your presence is fullness of joy. Where can I go in this world so dim to find such light and life? My Savior died that I could have peace within my soul. And your love, it fills my heart so much that I keep singing all the while. I want to lift your name and cause the world to smile. In your presence is fullness of joy. In your presence is fullness of joy. And no matter where I go or what I face in life, in your presence is fullness of joy. In your presence is fullness of joy. In your presence is fullness of joy. And no matter where I go or what I face in life, in your presence is fullness of joy.
The next few months while Grace was in the special care unit, they really were like a roller coaster journey for us with a total uncertainty. There was the shock of what had just happened, and it became an ongoing journey. Very soon they discovered that Grace couldn't suck a bottle. Obviously I couldn't breastfeed, but they even trying to give her a bottle, she couldn't suck a bottle, so they had to tube feed her. And it was quite a traumatic thing to watch, because they would wrap her in a blanket so she couldn't pull the tube out. They would put a tube down her throat and she would be gagging, and then they would feed her. And horrific as it looked, we had to learn to do this before we could bring Grace home. And you know, you just had to get on with it. You had to get used to it. Others might be appalled at looking at this happening, but we had to adapt to it because that is what had to be done. And eventually we could put the tube down her nose, which was maybe not quite as traumatic. But, you know, we never ever allowed anyone else to tube feed Grace, because we just felt there was too much responsibility on other people's hands, because she very often choked during the tube feed. On a regular basis, food would enter the lungs and she would get a lung infection and she would have to be hospitalized. The doctors discovered she had a condition. They were able to put a name to it, and it was called familial dysautonomia. This really affects all the automatic functions in the body. So she had no bowel control. She was permanently in nappies, permanently diarrhea kind of nappies. She didn't produce tears. She couldn't feel pain, so she would get injured easily. She had no temperature control, so all the time we had to keep the temperature at home at a constant heat, so she wouldn't feel, because she wouldn't feel the cold, she wouldn't notice. We didn't have a lot of money in those days, but we had to prioritize heating. The peristalsis, the movement of the food going down into the stomach, didn't function properly, and so food would regularly go down the wrong tube and into the lungs. Her vocal cords didn't work properly. It affected her speech. And the whole thing was really hard work looking after Grace. We had tube feeds, regular tube feeds during the day and at night. She was on a nebulizer for her breathing. And as well as all this, we had another 1-year-old child, Kirsty. So my sister Fiona, she came over from Northern Ireland and she lived with us for a while to look after Kirsty, because Grace would often be rushed into hospital. So Fiona was there to look after Kirsty. And this became a continuous pattern in our lives. She'd be in hospital, she'd be there for a while, maybe up to 6 weeks, and then she'd be home for a while and then back again. And when she went into hospital, because it was so tiring looking after her, sometimes we would be feeling guilty because we actually got a chance for a bit of a rest. But then she would be in hospital a while and we'd be so fed up, we just longed for her to come home. And, we might go in after a few weeks and they'd say, oh, we're sorry. They say, she can come home on this day, and we'd go in and they'd say, oh, we're sorry, she's taken this or this has happened, and she would be in longer. And so that was our life. As a young married couple, we were just like ships passing in the night, because we were taking it in turns to go into the hospital. So we hardly see each other, and we would just long for her to come home again from the hospital. There were just new developments all the time. One time we went in and they said she has purpura, I think it's called, and it was like bruising on the skin. And then another time I went in and she was just staring into space, and they said she was having seizures as well. One of the most difficult things really was when we were leaving the hospital at night. She would be in her cot and we'd be waving by through the window on the way out, and she'd be in her cot crying. Now, she didn't produce tears, but you could see the expression on her face. And that was really, really heartbreaking to go each night and to leave her there. That was probably one of the most difficult experiences. We just had to walk out. We had to walk away, and we had to entrust her into the care of the nurses who did love her. So you really had to be tough to survive. You nearly had to become numb to the inner pain that was going on. I think I was in a permanent state of shock, just going through the motions and doing what had to be done. It was a place of deep isolation, a burden that couldn't be shared, questions that couldn't be answered, a permanent state of shock and being overwhelmed, a burden too big to carry, a disappointment too great to overcome, fear of what tomorrow might bring, a life of uncertainty and confusion where faith and belief were tested to their limits. The next song is called "Why Am I Hurting This Way?"
This way, whenever you say that you can heal me, why do I feel so alone when surrounded by those who say they understand? Is it the way that I'm made? Is it something I've said? Is it sin in my life? The answers don't come easy, and I feel like I can't go on. I've lost the strength sad without your love, oh Lord. Why do I feel so condemned that this is the end? I want to run, oh Lord, but where is there I can hide from my feelings inside when they rise and take hold of me? There's only one thing to do. I must turn back to you and find my way. You were there all the time. You never let me go. You never turned away from me. You saw the tears, you felt the pain. You understood the questions and dealt with me so patiently. And if I gain nothing at all from what life would bring with its triumphs and tragedies, I'd still have you. You'll always be there. I know that you care. Your precious love is everywhere. Forgive me, Lord, for taking my eyes off you. Forgive me, Lord, for trying to work the answers out when you and you alone know all the answers. And my life is placed safe within your care.
Our journey for the next number of years was really an ongoing journey of where there was no stable home life. Everything was in turmoil. There were high moments and there were low moments. I can think of a high moment, you know, from Grace was born, the church was praying for her. They were praying for her to be healed. And there came a time when there was a breakthrough. And for the first time, Grace was actually able to eat with a spoon and a bowl, and her favorite was jelly and ice cream. And it was absolutely wonderful to see her eating with a spoon and not having to be tube fed. And we were delighted. We were really excited at this healing that had taken place, that she no longer had to be tube fed. You know, I remember going around to women's meetings and sharing testimony of how Grace had been healed. And it was a really great season when she really was not going into hospital, but she was eating normally. But then came a low moment. After months of what seemed like healing, Grace got a chest infection and she was back in hospital. And you know, my whole world just collapsed. I was so disappointed. I really had believed there was a breakthrough. My faith was crushed. I was bewildered. I was confused. I said, God, I really believed you. I really believed this. And I had to adjust to that disappointment. I had to face the fact that she wasn't healed. She still had the problems and she still got infections. And that was a very big and difficult adjustment for me. It was a dark season. It felt like hope was lost. And there were really some dark times. Several times, on several occasions, Grace stopped breathing. She would turn a colour of blue and we had to call an ambulance. I remember one particular occasion, and it was at Christmas, and she was rushed into hospital, and we were going to visit her on Christmas Day. And it was like, while the rest of the world were having their Christmas dinners, here we were going into the hospital, and it was horrendous, really. And when we went in, Santa was coming to the ward. Grace was on a ventilator. They had told us the night before that there was a 50-50 chance that she would survive. But she was okay. And I just remember Santa coming in, and she couldn't talk. She was on the ventilator, but her face was crying, and it was just heartbreaking to watch. I didn't know whether she was crying tears of joy at seeing Santa or crying because she couldn't communicate. So that was really difficult. Another occasion, she wasn't well, and I wasn't near my own hospital. I took her into another hospital, and they didn't know her, and they took all my details. And then when I'd finished giving all the details, they rang the ward and they said, "We're admitting a child with multiple bruising." And I was just absolutely horrified. I thought, they think I'm a bad mum. And I went up to the ward to see her, and she'd already gone on ahead. And I walked in, and I just felt like all the nurses were looking at me. There's the mother. But you know, when I went up, she was singing "The Lord Reigns." It's a little chorus singing "The Lord Reigns" and lifting her hands in praise. And very soon the notes came from the hospital, and the nurses realized, you know, that I wasn't the bad mother. You know, in her local hospital, the nurses actually learned the song "The Lord Reigns," and they'd all be singing along with her with their hands in the air, "The Lord Reigns." And in fact, the sister in the hospital, in her local hospital, became a Christian, and she started attending our local church in Lee. So even in the darkest seasons, there was light. Grace, as I said, had a speech defect, and the only one that really could properly understand Grace was Kirsty. So we would say to Kirsty, "Kirsty, what's she saying?" And she would tell us. But there was one thing that she did that we did understand, and that was, if she was in any kind of pain, I know she didn't have pain, but obviously some kind of discomfort, she would come with her hands on her chest and she would say to either myself, Nick, or Kirsty, "Pray." And so we would just lay hands on her and say, "Lord, just pray for healing in the name of Jesus." And every single time she got relief from whatever discomfort it was. And that really spoke to me, because her faith, you know, we always think of coming like a child with faith, and her faith was 100%. She knew without a doubt that when she came and she asked for prayer, that she would be healed. And I think there's lessons to be learned from that. You see, it's easy to have faith in the moment, but, you know, to sustain faith for years isn't as easy. We came across well-meaning people who, you know, they gave us advice. "Have you tried standing in faith?" Well, of course we had. "Have you tried giving thanks in advance for the healing?" We had tried everything you could think of. Somebody said, "It's not God's fault. It must be something that you're doing." And so there was all kinds of conflicting and condemning advice given. You know, it's easy to step in and to give advice when you're not living and experiencing it, when you're not walking the same path, when you're not standing in the person's shoes. The next song I'm going to sing is "I Need to Give It All to You."
I need you, for this life isn't easy. The many hurts and disappointments that I face, I can't make it on my own. Oh Lord, stay close to me, I pray. Help me through this darkest night within my soul. Help me to see that you're the one who's in control, and I must trust you through the night. I feel so empty. My heart is crushed with disappointment. So many people who have hurt and let me down. I just want to run away and leave it all behind. But I know, Lord, that you love me. You died on Calvary that I could be set free. Forgive my foolishness for seeing only me. Oh Lord, I need you now. How can I ever turn my back on you? After all you've done for me, how can I not be true? Maybe if I fix my eyes to see no one but you, I would see the hope that lies ahead. You said I am the only way, the truth, the life. So the darkness that I feel cannot belong to you. It's time I realized that you could see me through. I need to give it all to you. It's time I realize that you can see me through. I need to give it all to you.
In 1993, we moved from England to live in Northern Ireland. Nick had already gone on ahead and he had begun to start the beginnings of a church in Drogheda in the south of Ireland. Myself and Kirsty went by boat, took the car full of our stuff and went by boat to Northern Ireland. And Grace, who was in hospital at the time, was transferred from one hospital to another. The sister, actually, that became a Christian, travelled with her. And she went to that hospital and she was there in the hospital for a month. During that time, a decision was made to put a tube into her stomach. Now, this was mainly for convenience for feeding, to make it easier for the nurses. But the surgeon came and he explained to us that there was a significant risk to Grace. There was a significant chance of brain damage and she most certainly would be unlikely to remain intact. You know, Grace was physically handicapped, but in spite of her speech defect, her mind was intact and her understanding was normal. She played just like any child. In fact, she adapted play to suit life as she knew it. She had a doll that she tube fed and we had a little tube and syringe and she would tube feed her doll. Her and Kirsty played together. She had her own little unique personality. She was a character. Kirsty was very soft and gentle. Grace was the opposite. She was a fighter. She was very strong-willed. She was only half the size of Kirsty, even though she was just a year younger. But, you know, sometimes Kirsty would come and Grace would have her hair. And, Mom, Grace is pulling my hair. So she had such a unique personality. And we didn't want the risk of losing all of this. And so we decided not to have the operation, but to focus on the quality of Grace's life. You know, for the next 11 months, Grace never went near a hospital. We had a great time with Grace. She was put on permanent oxygen. We had oxygen fitted into the home. And then every time we were out, we took cylinders with us. In fact, she came with us down to our church in Drogheda on a number of occasions. Also, my sister raised funds to bring herself and me and my cousin Gillian and Kirsty and Grace to Euro Disney in Paris. And so we had a fantastic trip there. We called in to England on the way, and Grace was able to see the nurses again that she'd left. And we created some great memories there in Euro Disney. The other good thing was my parents got to see much more of Grace, because when we lived in England, they didn't see her very often. So they got to see Kirsty and Grace a lot more when we were living in Northern Ireland. Just about a year after we'd moved over, it was coming towards our wedding anniversary. Our wedding anniversary was the 14th of June, 1994. And so Nick was going down to Portlaoise to do some ministry on that date. So we decided we'd have a little celebration the night before. We lived in Bangor, County Down, and we decided to go to Donaghadee. We'd had the kids, Kirsty and Grace were paddling in the sea. It was a lovely day. We left them with some friends while we went, and we had no money, so it was very basic. I remember having coffee, I remember having ice cream, probably a bit of pizza, but it was okay. It was good to celebrate. We came back, we picked the kids up. It was a beautiful sunny evening, one of them nights, where it's still bright at 10:30 at night. The kids were out in the garden playing with the other kids from the other family, having a great time. We brought them home. I did a bedtime routine, which I did every night. I always got the guitar and I would sing and play. And I always started with an old gospel song, Angels Watching Over Me. And Kirsty always went to sleep straight away during that song. But Grace was harder to get to sleep. She would be clapping through the songs. And eventually I would always finish with Amazing Grace. And then I could see she was crying. She cried every time I sang Amazing Grace, and then she would fall asleep. So it was just a very normal night. In the middle of the night, we now had a feeding machine, and she had a tube constantly connected, so you just attach the feeding machine. And she choked that night, and there was nothing unusual, was nothing, we'd seen this many times. So the next morning, Nick went off. It was our wedding anniversary. He went to Portlaoise. She was going to minister for 3 days. My dad called with boxes for moving house, because we'd just received word that we were getting a council house. We were on the emergency list. The house we were in, we couldn't afford the heating. It was a huge, big house we were renting. And so myself and Grace went to see the house, and during the week while Kirsty was at school. But anyway, by the evening, Grace wasn't really improving, and I was trying to hold off because I didn't want her to go back into hospital. But eventually I rang my mum, and my mum and dad came down, and we brought Grace to hospital. I don't know how we got a message to Nick, because there were no mobile phones, but we got the message to him, and he began the journey home. We went in, we even on the way, Grace asked for prayer, and she found relief, the usual. And then we went in. It was just all routine for me. I was so used to doing it. And they said, "Okay, we've got her settled. You can come now." So my dad stayed in the area with Kirsty, and myself and my mum went down and waited outside the door. And they said, "She's taken a turn for the worse, so if you would just wait outside a minute." And I could hear all these beeps going on inside. And then I heard a long beep, and then silence. And I knew that my 4-year-old daughter had just died. And I was numb. I was in total shock, because I just never expected this to happen. And it's like you see in the movies when somebody's died and they say, "Can you come into this room?" And there the door opened, and a man led us into the room, and I knew what was coming next. And he just said, "I'm sorry, your daughter didn't make it." And my mum burst into tears, And I just sat there completely numb and in shock. I went in and I held Grace. She was still warm. The nurse was talking to her as if she was alive. There were no mobile phones, so my mum went to the phone box and called the relatives, and of course everybody was in total shock. We couldn't contact Nick. He was already on the journey home, so he didn't find out that she died until he arrived, and he was led by a nurse into a room where we were all waiting. And you know, by the time we went in then together to Grace, she was like a stone. And that was a shock to me because I hadn't experienced death. And you know, life for me suddenly became this blur. I can remember praying in the car park with Nick before we went home. I remember going to visit her in the funeral home and shaking uncontrollably. I was thinking, what's wrong with me? I had no clue what was wrong until my mum explained that I was in shock. I remember the funeral and the little white coffin, the songs that we sang, the word that Nick spoke, the packed church, the relatives crying all around me, even two of them loudly crying and running out, overcome by grief. But I just remember being totally numb. The pain was too deep to feel, and only time would help me heal. But in my darkest hour, God was there and he walked with me. I've recently completed a degree in psychotherapy, and for that we had to do our own personal therapy, and only then I realised that I'd put a lot of the past Grace and everything, good and bad memories, all it's like put in a box and closing the lid in order to survive and move on. And so I've had to tap into that again and just learn to embrace emotions, because emotions are like a wave. Grief is like a wave. It will come, but a wave also moves on, and so we can cope with and deal with them. My next song is He Will Walk With You.
I have sorrow and sadness and pain in my heart. I have tears that will always flow. For the child that I bore is here no more. She suddenly had to go. And the pain that I feel is so hard to heal. Only time will help it mend. And if I didn't have you to lean on right now, my hopes would come to an end. Will you walk with me through the valley so deep, where the flowers don't seem to grow, where life is so still and the birds do not sing, and the storms seem to overcome? Will you stay by my side and help me along till my heart can sing again? Will you hold me so tight and help me to stand? Will you be to me a friend? Now as time has gone on, he has helped me be strong. He has never once let me down. He has always been there in the depths of despair. I have never felt alone. And the God who has given such peace to my heart is waiting to answer you. Bring your valley, your care, and your deep despair. He's going to bring you through. He will walk with you through the valley so deep, and the flowers will start to grow. You'll begin again, and the birds will sing, and the storms will not overcome. He will stay by your side and help you strong till your heart can sing again. He will hold you so tight and help you to stand. He will prove to you a and help you to stand. He will prove to you a friend.
After Grace died, we experienced extreme grief. Kirsty was only 5. She had no concept of death and its meaning. We hadn't planned or prepared for this. Nick became busy to cope, and I became more withdrawn. I started having panic attacks. I was finding it hard to hold on, and I was feeling depressed. I didn't have answers. I hadn't got everything nicely figured out. There weren't answers. And grief came in waves. Just as you thought you got back on your feet, the wave of grief would come again and knock you down. And once again, like my life as a child, the world as I knew it had changed forever. It would never be the same again. But all I knew was that I had to surrender to God and cast all my cares on him. You know, that was the biggest storm in my life, but I've faced many storms, as we all do. You know, we've done nearly 30 years of ministry in Drogheda, and it's had its ups and downs. But it's my faith in God that has kept me strong, even when I felt the weakest. You know, grief and loss is an inevitable part of our journey. Loss comes in many shapes and forms. Loss of job, loss of security, loss of strength, loss of ability or mobility, loss of identity, loss of friendships, relationships, loss of trust, loss of hope, and the big loss, death of a loved one or even a pet. We all face loss. We will all find ourselves saying, if only I'd done this. We all wish we could turn back the clock, but we can't. We have to navigate the storms of life and find our anchors and our strength to go on. The next song I will sing is Casting All My Cares on You.
Casting all my cares on you alone, knowing you are there in every storm. You're my anchor, you're my healer, you give me strength to be more than conqueror. So I will give you all my praise. I will worship, though the storm may come. I will worship with the rising sun, for you are worthy to be praised. I will bow down at your feet, oh Lord. I surrender my heart and life, oh Lord, and so forever we'll be together in perfect love. Casting all my cares on you alone, knowing you are there in every storm. You're my anchor, you're my healer, you give me strength to be more than conqueror. So I will give you all my praise. I will worship, though the storm may come. I will worship with the rising sun, for you are worthy to be praised. I will bow down at your feet, oh Lord. I surrender my heart and life, oh Lord, and so forever we'll be together in perfect love. Casting all my cares on you, oh Lord, knowing you are there in every storm. You're my anchor, you're my healer, you give me strength to be more than conqueror. So I will give you all my praise. I will give you
We all have a story to tell. Every life has a story, and every story can impact the life of others. We need to share our story. Like the old gospel song says, if I can help somebody as I pass along, if I can cheer somebody with a word of song, if I can show somebody he is traveling wrong, then my living will not be in vain. And I just want to very briefly finish with someone else's story. In June 2018, a group of young footballers between 11 and 16 went into a cave with their coach, and floods and storms came and they became trapped. They couldn't see in the cave, and the caverns for their way out began to fill with water. And a big operation was set up. Divers were sent in. They had to put ropes to lead them out. And in the end, because some of the caverns were totally overflowed, the boys had to be anesthetized so that they would be calm as they went through hours of underground caverns to escape. They were in there for 18 days, but every boy was rescued. And you know, faith is believing where we cannot see. And faith is also trusting, even if we cannot understand. You see, one of the divers, a specially trained Navy SEAL, gave his life to save the boys. He didn't survive. He drowned in the cave. We can't comprehend that. That's the power of love. And that is the story of the gospel. That's the story of God's love. God's story is that Jesus died that we might live. And we need to be rescued or saved from death and destruction. Jesus came to lead us out of darkness and into light. And you know, today Jesus can bring hope to the darkness of our pain, healing to the brokenness of our wounds, light to the shadow of our souls, and peace to the confusion and chaos of our lives. You know, during that dark season of my life, I had very little trust, but I felt that God was saying, how much trust do you have? And I said, I have about that much. And God said, give me what you have. And he said, you're in the harbour being repaired and restored, but you will sail again. You know, there's always hope. When we're broken, we need to receive. A bird can't fly with a broken wing. A ship can't sail the stormy seas if it needs repairing. And a car cannot run on empty. It needs to be refueled or recharged. Let God into the place of pain, the place of darkness, and the place of brokenness in your life. My final song for today is called Let Me In.
I see the life that you long to offer me. I see the brokenness, the wounds that will not heal. I see the shame and the grief you have to bear. I wish you knew just how much I really care. So let me in, let me love you, let me stay by your side. Let me in, I'm the answer that you need. Let me in, I will love you like no other could love. I will take the pain away and set you free. The greatest need in your life right now is love. Yet you hide away from me and close the door. You try to struggle and work it out alone, fearing rejection if the real you is known. Let me in, let me love you, let me stay by your side. Let me in, I'm the answer that you need. Let me in, I will love you like no other could love. I will take the pain away and set you free. Can't you see, my love is always there for you. is stronger than anything you've known. So let me in, don't struggle all alone. Let me in, let me love you, let me stay by your side. Let me in, I'm the answer that you need. Let me in, I will love you like no other would love. I will take the pain away and set you free.
Thank you so much for that, Pastor Janice. What an incredible story. You know, we trust and believe that God is in the business of transforming our lives as we journey together. And so we'd encourage you to keep connecting with what we do, both online and in person. We have our online content, which goes out daily. We have our in-person services happening every Sunday at 10 and 12 noon. So do come and be a part of what God is doing in Drogheda and the surrounding areas. Just want to encourage you as well to keep praying, and we have our 24/7 prayer running. The link for that is on our website. Also our giving link if you want to be a part of financially contributing to the life of the church. You can find all that information on solidrock.ie. This Monday night, even though it's a bank holiday Monday, we will have our prayer hour from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. in the church, so come and be a part of that. And we're just going to pray the grace together as we close. And now, may the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the sweet fellowship of the Holy Spirit abide with us now and forevermore. Amen. And surely goodness and mercy shall follow us all the days of our lives. And we will dwell in the house of the Lord forever and ever. Amen. Amen. God bless you. Have an incredible week ahead.